And he's like, well, I think this would be a great opportunity, and you guys can come back to Rochester, and this is where your home is, and all that good stuff. I said, yeah, you're right about that. I said, maybe one day we'll eventually come back to Rochester, but now it's not the time. So that was probably February. And then in March, I don't know, fate would have it, I lost a really good friend, and it made me think about life in a little different lens. It all worked out really well in the end, and we continue to pivot. I mean, we've had to pivot no less than 3 or 4 times here, and I'm sure there'll be another one.
Welcome to Now That's It, Stories of MSP Success, where we dive into the journeys of some of the trailblazers in our industry to find out how they used their passion for technology to help turn managed services into the thriving sector it is today.
All right. Well, Justin, thank you so much for joining me today. I always look forward to having conversations with really interesting folks like yourself. Why don't you make an introduction? Tell everybody who you are today, what your current role is, and a little bit about maybe Bright Computers.
Sounds good. So I'm Justin Smith. I'm President and Chief Operating Officer of Bright. We're located just outside of Rochester, New York, in a little suburb called Victor. And we are a systems integrator and managed services provider. And so I'm sort of that problem solver, miracle worker. I have 2 sets of cards, one with President and Chief Operating Officer and another set with problem solver, miracle worker. Try to perform whatever role or whatever title I need to perform on any given day. So that's me.
That's great. So President and Chief Operating Officer, successful MSP, successful IT service provider in Rochester. But growing up, it sounded like you had a little different plan. You were a pretty good baseball player when you were a kid. Is that true?
Well, that is, sort of true. I would say I was played a lot of baseball when I was growing up. I happened to have a really good mentor in my father, who was a pretty great baseball player himself. Was drafted by the New York Mets in 1966, and had a career for a little while. But he taught me the game of baseball and showed me the love of the game of baseball, and I certainly continued that through my Little League days and into high school, and then fortunate enough to play in college, and then play professionally in the Philadelphia Phillies organization for a little bit. It was a lot of fun. Certainly a kid's dream come true. All kids dream at some point in time about playing baseball on a big field with people watching you. And I got to do some of that and never made it to the show, but that's okay. I met lots of great people and lots of great coaches. Still have lots of great friends from my baseball days, and treated me very, very well. So I'm very happy with it. No regrets.
That's great. That's great, Justin. You were a pitcher, right?
I was a right-handed pitcher.
What was your favorite pitch?
My father told me to always tell everybody fastball.
Yeah.
But probably my best pitch was probably my curveball. I had a pretty good curveball. But
fantastic.
You gotta throw it hard,
Number one, amazing. Congrats for being able to play D1 baseball at Villanova. That's fantastic. And then
Thank you.
To get a chance to play a couple years in the minors for the Phillies, that's a fantastic accomplishment. So don't sell yourself short.
Well, thank you. I'm one of the lucky ones. I saw a lot of really great, very talented guys who never got a shot, probably way more talented than I was. It's just funny the way the game works. But
yeah. So obviously the baseball dream ended at some point, right? And you had to go and find a real job. And when you were sort of figuring out what you wanted to do with the rest of your life, what sort of came first? Was it an interest to be involved in sort of IT? Or did you have sort of an entrepreneurial sort of spirit in you early on in your career?
Yes, it's a great question. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial home. Both of my parents were and are entrepreneurs. My mother, when I was young, owned a women's fashion business with her mother, and a very successful business here in town. And so she was an entrepreneur and, out there working, 5 days a week, and actually 6 days a week. They were open on Saturdays. They were a fashion, retail fashion shop. And I remember her very fondly Saturday mornings where she would go off to work, and myself, my brother and sister, we would stay home with my father, and we would bake pies while my mother was out actually working. And that was a lot of fun. I really fond memories, bacon pies with our father, and we would watch Fat Albert, and he would make elbow macaronis for us. I mean, I can still smell it today. But that was a lot of fun. And my father actually, serial entrepreneur. I'm not supposed to say that word serial.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a negative connotation. In his case, it's certainly not. But he started his first business in 1979, and at last count, I think we had a count of like 22 or 23 businesses that he had started and sold and shut down and merged and acquired and all sorts of great things. Some of them were very successful. Some of them not as successful as the others. But in all cases, I think he put a ton of effort and hard work into all of those initiatives, and that taught me a lot for sure, and really was a foundation for me becoming an entrepreneur and lighting that fire of entrepreneurship for sure.
That's great. So
Yeah.
a family of entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
and some great businesses that you all were part of.
Sure.
But at some point, your father had this idea to create, I guess, what we'd call a value-added reseller, right? I mean, he was essentially reselling computers and hardware and things like that. Is that the story? Is that how sort of the beginning of Bright?
Actually, it's not quite exactly like that. So after baseball, I was working for Xerox in Boston. I got my start in the world, and my father, all of his companies had always been IT related, so I'd had an IT sort of background. And when I got this opportunity to work at Xerox, I was fortunate to get an opportunity to kind of work in their digital product line group. So, traditionally analog light lens copier technology, they were making a transition into this digital products world, and I fit into that world better than the copier world. And so I got that opportunity to do that. And Xerox was a fantastic place to get your start in the world of business, just generally, regardless of what you were doing for them. The training programs were incredible. The people were incredible. The leadership was incredible. I just learned a ton. Things that today I still utilize in my daily business life. So it was a fantastic experience. But he was, again, being very entrepreneurial in nature and never satisfied with sort of what he was doing at the time. He had an opportunity to do some consulting around this company called Upstate Wholesale Supply, which today is Bright.
Okay.
And he was asked to do some due diligence to look at this organization. The founder of the company was looking to potentially sell the organization, so he got involved in it. And he asked me to get involved in it. So fall of 1998, I helped get involved in that. I did some research for him and about the value-added reselling business, about the OEM white box manufacturing business, what it's like to work with Intel and AMD, and just do some competitive analysis with IBM and Gateway and Dell and all that stuff. So I was fortunate enough to get involved in that. At the end of the day, turned over whatever research I had done to him in the fall of 1998, and I thought that was it. I was very happy at Xerox. I was married at the time. I still am married at the time, 26 years later. We're still married to the great, wonderful lady. And we were living our life up in Boston, very, very happy. And he came back to me in like the February timeframe of 1999 and said, "Hey, I got a really good idea. Why don't you and I buy that company together?" I said, "Awesome. I don't want to buy that company together. I am really happy here in Boston. Stacy, my wife, and I are really happy here. We love it here in Boston. We're, extremely happy." And he's like, "Well, I think this would be a great opportunity, and you guys can come back to Rochester, and this is where home is, and all that good stuff." I said, "Yeah, you're right about that." I said, "Maybe one day we'll eventually come back to Rochester, but now is not the time." So that was probably February. And then in March is kind of fate would have it. I lost a really good friend. And it was an unfortunate accident, and lost a really good friend, and it made me think about life in a little different lens.
Sure.
And Stacy and I started talking a little bit about this, and moving back to Rochester just sort of made more sense. We were thinking about starting to raise a family or start a family anyway, and we've always wanted to be closer to our family when we had kids, and so I jumped into this opportunity with him, and we bought this company, bought Upstate Wholesale Supply. It's a really tiny OEM white box manufacturer at the time, maybe 11 employees. My father, John, and I were employees 12 and 13, and the rest is history 23 years later.
Wow. So what's it like sort of buying and running a business with your father, with your family? Now your brother's involved. What's that been like?
It's been incredible. I mean, it really, really has. At least for us, you hear horror stories about family business ventures, people being in business with their mother or father or brother or sister or whatever, and it's some of those experiences aren't great. My tale is a great one. I really can't say anything negative about it, and I think it really works because we keep business and family life separate. We when we get together and it's a family event or a family activity, whether it's a graduation from school or some type of first communion or something like that, or a birthday celebration, we're just the Smiths then.
Yeah.
When we're in the office environment, we work as colleagues and coworkers, and we respect each other's opinions. Sometimes those opinions differ and we agree to disagree, but we always work towards a common ground, and we share a set of goals and objectives, and we know that we're going to meet those goals and objectives sometime by collaborating, and so we do. It's been really great for us. Worked out.
That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. So you sort of inherited. Obviously, you and your father bought this business. That's a little different than starting a business from sort of the ground up. So what were some of the challenges that you two faced as you joined the company and obviously tried to turn it into something that you had a vision for?
Well, I think the first thing I'll say is I was 28 years old when we bought this company together. Mm-hmm. And when you're 28 years old, you think you know a lot, and you probably know a lot. Everything's relative, but you know very little in terms of business and how to run a business. And, the biggest challenge for me is that my father, being, an entrepreneur, was not only working on Bright, but he was working on 2 or 3 other things at the same time, right? That's just the nature of who he is. It's made him, very successful. And so I think he gave me probably too much autonomy at the time to run Bright. And, I made a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes that a young 28-year-old newbie entrepreneur would make. And, some of those were pretty significant in nature. We were a very small company at the time. We weren't in positions to make, significant financial mistakes, and made a few of them. And, at the end of the day, maybe it was by his design, or I'm not sure. We've never actually had that conversation. Maybe one day I'll just ask him. I said, "Did you really, just let me go to see what would happen here, and let me learn my lessons on my own, or not?" But definitely learned a lot of hard lessons. That's tough. It was really tough, but luckily I learned from all those lessons, and haven't made the same mistake for a second time ever. I've made a lot of mistakes. I make them every day.
Sure.
But I usually don't make the same mistake for a second time, which is good. But that was the hardest piece. I think the second hardest piece is that when you come into an organization and you're 28 years old and there's other people who have worked there for a long time, they're kind of all looking at you like, who is this kid? And, rightfully so. I have no, ill will towards any of those folks. They're fantastic people, and still have 1 or 2 that are actually with us, 22, 23 years later. But, I need to kind of build my own team. It's tough to inherit a team. And, I think if I had to do it over again, I probably would have acted a little quicker and built my own team, because it's really hard. It's really hard when you don't have people that are kind of all on board and ready to jump in that foxhole with you. You know, it's just tough. And you got to earn it. You know, from my perspective, I had to earn it.
Right.
And maybe I didn't do a good enough job earning it. But you know, I needed to create my own team. And once I created my own team and started surrounding myself with, you know, different types of people that had that same vision or believed in my visions, you know, we were kind of off to the races.
That's great.
Yeah, it's cool.
So obviously, if you could look back at the 28-year-old Justin and give yourself advice, create that team earlier is probably one of them. Is there anything else you'd tell yourself as you were buying this company at 28?
Hey, buddy, it's going to be a lot of work. Get ready to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, be exhausted, and try and raise, you know, a family and be a husband and have a social life and all that stuff. Get ready. It's not easy. It's not easy. And you're going to have some moments of doubt and, you know, just power through them. And, you know, that's essentially what I did. I mean, it's just,
right. Yeah.
And I don't know, but I would say just get ready. It's a hell of a lot of work. I don't know, which was good because I think baseball taught me that. I was never the most talented baseball player. You know, I certainly had some talent, but I was never the most talented. But I was a really hard worker, and I still am a hard worker today. And I've gotten here, I think, because of a lot of hard work. My father always tells me, you know, the luckier I get, you know, it's the harder I work, the luckier I get. I apologize. Yeah. He's always said that, and it's so true. It's so true. The harder you work, the luckier you get.
That's great.
Yep.
So your brother joined you a few years later. I think you said, you know, 4 years after you and your dad bought the company.
Sure.
Why do you think it took him 4 years to jump on board with you guys?
Well, Trevor, very talented individual. You know, probably could be leading a, you know, Fortune 500 company very successfully right now. I mean, he's just super, super talented. We probably, you know, weighed him down, to be honest with you. I'm very fortunate to have him as a business partner. But, you know, he's a couple years younger. He graduated from the University of Vermont, and he wanted to move to the big city, which he did. He got a great start with Bloomberg, another, you know, Xerox type of organization. You got to feel very fortunate to get an opportunity to start with companies like that, and he did. And he was very successful there, and then he got into, you know, software sales space down in New York City and was sort of living that New York City life and really enjoying it. And similar to the efforts that my father made with me, and oh, by the way, Mom was involved in some of these efforts too. Hey, I think it'd be a really good idea for you to come back to Rochester and do this with your father. You know,
sure.
that mother's influence is really hard to ignore, right? I mean, Mom tells you something or asks you something, you kind of got to really think about it really hard, right?
You got to listen. Yep.
Got to listen, right? So, you know, it took a little while for him to sort of come on board and feel that heat from them as well. I don't think I ever put that sort of pressure on him. Certainly we were excited to have his talent to come on board, and you know, but it wasn't, we didn't have, you know, 4 years of conversations before he joined. He joined in 2003, 2004. We didn't have 4 years of conversations. It was probably like maybe 5 or 6 months and say, hey, you want to come join us and do this with us? And he eventually said, yeah, this makes sense. So
that's great. So I got to know Trevor pretty well in Boston. He came, you guys attended one of our business transformation events, and I got to know him pretty well. And he's, as you mentioned, a very charismatic, passionate, energetic guy. The one thing that actually I really loved about him is he kept talking about security. And when I asked him about, you know, Bright's product set, and he said, we lead with security. And then when we started to talk about this a little bit, you said that was like, he brought that to Bright. And why do you think that was so important to Trevor? And obviously, how did he convince you guys that security was what we need to do?
Yeah, so absolutely, all the credit. He gets all the credit for getting us into the security space. So it's kind of funny, like he joined us. We're an OEM white box manufacturer. That industry was changing. I mean, the writing was on the wall, right? We were very successful in that space, but competing with the likes of Dell and Compaq and HP and IBM and all of the consolidation that was going on in the industry, and businesses going out of business, like Gateway and eMachines and other companies that were well known at the time, was sort of daunting, sort of scary, right? And so we saw that all happening. We saw the cost of our BOM going from $1,900 per PC down to sub 1,000 overnight. We saw gross profit margin erosion, and we had to diversify, at least into IT services, right? And so we were starting to do that anyway. And then he really had this passion for protecting data. And it was well beyond like just antivirus on an endpoint. It was, how do we protect this data? And so it all started with full disk encryption. You had these 10 gig hard drives or 20 gig hard drives. They were tiny at the time. Right now we have terabytes of little disk. He's like, I think we've got an opportunity here. And he did some research on the industry, and this was something that was being talked about certainly at the federal government level, and was kind of getting pushed down to the state government level, and mandating that disks, be fully encrypted so that people couldn't pop them out and steal sensitive data. And so that's how we entered into that space, really protecting data at rest through full disk encryption products. Started with a company called AlertSec initially, and then AlertSec was purchased by Checkpoint, and then it just goes further and further and further. We went from the endpoint to the core, and now today it's just the amount of security work and the security conversations that we have are right. They're just constant all day, so which is great. And I think it's really top of mind for everybody in an organization, whether it's at the board level or the C-suite level, or down through the IT organization, and more importantly, the employees and the end users, the patients, if it's a healthcare organization, or the financial folks that are banking with a small regional bank or whatever it is. They're concerned about their data now, right? They don't want it leaking all over the internet or all over the dark web. So it's prevalent conversation.
Yeah, it's just you guys. So that it's a common, sort of an expected conversation. Security is now. But you guys were sort of early to market in that conversation, if I remember. And I think when we were talking before, not everybody was on board immediately with we're going to lead with security. What was sort of the internal discussions about this? Obviously, you've got to provide security services in your IT blend of services, but to be able to say, we're going to secure your IT environment, what was that like? What was the conversations happening internally?
Well, again, I think this is one of the challenges of running an organization, right? You have, a very successful component of your business that's sort of paying the bills. You're building these white boxes, and it's a large portion of your revenue. 95% of your revenue, 98% of your revenue is a big part of our revenue, right? And so to start to transition into more of a services model, or into a security services model, or a security infrastructure model, whether it was integration or value-added reselling or whatever, it was just, fear of the unknown.
Right.
And so you've got to take some chances. And, there's been a lot of case studies out there. Kodak's a big one here in Rochester, New York, where they owned all this intellectual property around digital photography, and they didn't capitalize on that. They didn't want to cannibalize their film business. And, you can't fault those people for making those decisions, but I think that you can learn from those decisions that were made. And, Kodak at one point in time was one of the largest companies in the world, if not the largest company. And, now they're very successful with what they do, but they're a shell of what they used to be. And, that's because of the decisions that were made to not continue to look down the road and out into the future and to see what the world's going to be like. And, we were fortunate. I can't say that I had this crystal ball. I can't say that I made this decision, with a ton of data behind it at the time. It was just all too new, but it was exciting to us. And it was something that Trevor was passionate in, and I saw that passion in him. And I'm like, okay, let's go do it, man. Go take a chance. Just like, Dad gave me a chance to run this business at 28. I'm like, all right, you're on board. Let's go, buddy. You want to do this? Let's go do it. And, thank goodness we did.
Yeah. I think I always look at it as like you were diversifying your product offering to your customers, right? Because you had this really successful business that you still have today, right? It still feeds the top line, but you've got this other business that I've seen explosively grow in the last couple of years for you guys, and obviously the way you built your security offering, the way you built your IT managed service offering, is a big reason for that. And so now you got a handful of things that you can bring to your clients, and you're almost a one-stop shop, which I think is a really great thing. May not have felt like that years ago when you made that decision, but really important now that the world has changed the way that it has.
Certainly, I mean, we needed to diversify our revenue streams because our nature of our business was very cyclical. I mean, we had, our PC business was really big in June, July, and August and September, because most of what we were selling PCs into is, the education space. The institutions were buying technology during the off months of school. So we saw this big spike in revenue and in opportunity in the summer timeframe, and then again towards the end of the year, December, January timeframe. But in between, there was a lot of ups and downs. And so by diversifying, our revenue streams, we were able to create a much more consistent revenue stream, obviously, and grow on top of that. So it all worked out really well in the end, and we continue to pivot. I mean, we've had to pivot no less than 3 or 4 times here, and I'm sure there'll be another one. I don't know what it is right now, but I'm sure there'll be another one.
It's great that you're always sort of anticipating the future. You can't predict it, but anticipating and being able to pivot, like you said, when you need to. That's great.
And you need to save for a rainy day. I mean, that's the thing that I learned very early on, is that you have to save for a rainy day. If you've got it all out on the line and you're highly leveraged, you can't weather any storms, whether it's, catastrophic, unfortunate event like 9/11 or, the Great Recession or pandemic. I mean, you have to be positioned to weather those storms, and those storms could be a month, they could be a year, they could be 3 years. I mean, you just never know what they're going to be. So you need to save for a rainy day for sure, and get your company well positioned to weather those storms.
Yeah, that's great. So Trevor comes on, he's bringing some great ideas. He continues to sort of grow in the company. Why don't you talk a little bit about, obviously, Trevor's growth and the point where your dad, maybe it was time for him to exit and it just be the 2 brothers?
Yeah, so, I think this is tough, right? I mean, this is really tough. You have a father who has, just been an incredible father to both of us our entire lives, never missed a ball game, never, he was always there. Incredible mentor, just, our hero, my hero, our hero. And, but there came a time he was, removing himself from the business. He was involved in some other entrepreneurial activities, and maybe 5 or 10% of his time was being spent on Bright, where 100% of our time and focus was on Bright. And we were heading in a much different direction than we were when we originally bought the company. We were transitioning out of the white box manufacturing space. We made that decision around, I think, 2007, 2008 to get out of that business. It took us until 2012 to fully transition out of the business. We built our last PC in 2012 or shortly after that. But along with that, we needed to kind of we just needed to make this change. A lot of times entrepreneurs will kind of rob Peter to pay Paul, right? They'll take, profitability from one organization and put it towards something else they're doing. And there was times where that was happening. We were helping to fund these other entrepreneurial efforts. And, it is what it is. I mean, I knew fully well that this was most likely going to happen when I signed up. I wasn't expecting it to happen nearly immediately, but it did. And, Bright was suffering. And, eventually I had to have a conversation with my father and say, hey, listen, I think it's time. Trevor and I would like to kind of work on a transition plan with you here, and hopefully you'll give us some time to do that with you. And he was great. I mean, he was great. He allowed it to happen, and took us a couple of years to kind of work through that process. But eventually we got to the point where, we acquired his shares of the business, and Trevor and I are the sole proprietors of the organization now. And he's continued to be very successful with those other ventures. I think it worked for him too, because it allowed him to like go work on that and not worry about what we were doing. And we were kind of off, doing fine at that point in time. But honestly, it allowed us to just really rocket ship them. We'd had some pretty sustained growth, but as soon as that happened, we just went straight up, and we were able to take, that extra capital, I would say, and reinvest it back in Bright versus reinvesting it in some of these other things that Trevor and I had nothing to do with, or we had no eventual benefit in. And so it worked out well.
That's great. So
tough conversation though.
Tough
conversation, but you got to have them.
Yeah.
You got to have them in family business. A lot of people don't have them, and that's when things go bad. And I give him my father all the credit in the world, because he was great about it.
Yeah. So speaking of the family business, I mean, this is an amazing story of you and your dad, you and your brother, and your dad, and then you and your brother now as you build this. You've run this business together as a family, a couple of different parts of the family for a very long time. How have you done that without any sort of major issues, family issues, anything like that? Obviously, you're having some tough conversations in there, but how did you do that?
It's all about effective communication. And again, I sort of touched on this earlier. I think you have to keep family and business separate, and you really have to work at that. You really do. I mean, you get caught up in business-related conversations at a family event, and that's just, we've tried not to do that. When we're together as a family, we just enjoy each other and do family-related type of stuff. Yeah. When we're in the office, we can talk about business. It definitely, Trevor and I will be sitting, just sitting, relaxing in the family room or something like that one night after some type of event, and we'll have some business-related conversations, certainly. But, it never impacted what happened during the day, the intention of why we were all getting together. And you have to do that. And then, if there's a disagreement, there's a disagreement. Trevor's called me to the carpet multiple times. I've called him to the carpet multiple times. He's probably screamed at me a few times, and I probably screamed at him a few times. But you know what? At the end of the day, we really, truly respect that. And it's worked for us. It's worked for us. Very, very few times. Only very few times, yeah.
He only has good things to say about you behind your back. So, yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
that's
awesome. That's great.
Sure.
Let's talk for a minute, Justin, about scaling Bright. Obviously, you talked about this after your dad exited. You had this explosive growth, and that was sort of post transitioning to this new service model, right? You weren't reselling hardware and building computers anymore. You're selling managed services. How did the customers transition? Were you able to continue to maintain the same customers that you were servicing before? Were you having to go out and get new customers? And even more importantly, the ones that you did keep, were you able to grow those customers?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Chris. Certainly, it's always easier to sell to an existing customer, right? Sell new products and services to an existing customer. So retention has been a really big part of our success. We have had clients for, the entire time that I've owned this organization. People that we acquired new, 23 years ago are still clients of ours today. And we're selling them something totally different than we did 23 years ago. So, certainly client retention has been a strategy. It has to be a strategy for any organization that wants to grow. You can't add one and lose one, add one and lose one. You need to add one and then add another and another and another and another. And, of course, we're going to lose clients from here from time to time, which is okay. That's okay. For one reason or another, it just happens. But generally, we've been able to do a great job of customer retention, and then net new opportunities have really been what's, catapulted us. we've created a lot of those opportunities on our own. We've also had a great deal of help and assistance from our partners, partners like N-able and Checkpoint and CrowdStrike and Intel. I mean, I could go through the whole history of everybody we've ever worked with. We've gotten some sort of assistance from them. And I apologize for leaving some of you folks out, but it's not intentional. But everybody along the way has helped us for one reason or another. And I think the reason they have typically wanted to partner with us or work with us is because of our relationships. We have built some really, really strong relationships with some incredible clients that have allowed us to be in the position we're in today. They've been with us for so long, and it's just really about the relationships and the multiple layers of relationships that we've created with these organizations. I have, friends that I worked with many, many years ago that were directors or managers that are now CIOs or CISOs. They're up at the very top of the food chain in their organization, and that relationship just has continued to blossom to the point where, many of my clients are not just clients, they're really friends. I know them very well. I know their spouses very well. I know their kids and, what they're doing. And we've attended graduation parties and 40th birthday parties and all sorts of stuff like that, because you just really build true, long-lasting relationships, friendships, and people like to do business with people they like. And we don't always, they're they don't hand us anything though. We've still got to work for it, and we've got to be the right partner, the right integrator, the right solution. They've got a duty to their client, their employer, and they do it. So, but you got to have good relationships to at least have the conversation.
Great.
So speaking of partnerships, Justin, do you remember when, how did you come across N-able, and what was sort of that like, who brought N-able into the business?
Well, it's kind of funny. Right? I think it's been a long time. I can't remember the exact timing, but we got involved in the managed services space really because of Intel. And we had a really, really strong relationship, as you can imagine, with Intel. We were building so many PCs, and most of that was Intel inside, a little AMD here. But Intel sort of saw the writing on the wall and was having conversations with their large OEMs like us and saying, hey, you start thinking about managed services, this concept of managed services. And we think it's a really good idea for you because there's so much pricing pressure, and these multinational corporations are forming and putting all this pressure on you guys. You want to diversify your revenue streams even further. And we're like, okay, well, what do we do? And so we went to an event that Intel hosted, and I believe it's down in maybe Orlando or some other one of those destinations. And it was great. And there was a speaker there that we spent some time with who really painted this incredible IT services, managed services picture, and we bought in. And I believe it might have either been then or shortly thereafter that we were introduced to N-able. And, we needed a remote monitoring and management platform. And we vetted a handful of those. Can't remember all of them, but vetted a handful of those, and we chose N-able and Central. And we've been using that ever since. We've got definitely 10, close to 15 years of use with N-able, I would say.
That's great.
Yep.
You've obviously been very, very involved, not only on the product side of N-able, using our tool sets, but you've also been involved in some of the programs that we do around business transformation and operational efficiency. Can you talk a little bit about what your partners do for you to help you grow your business, sort of outside of the tool set that they're growing, things like benchmarking and such?
Yeah, Chris, that's been huge. I wish that we would have kind of gone through one of those transformational programs or benchmarking programs with you guys sooner. We've been a part of those. Certainly the program that I went to many, many years ago with Intel involved benchmarking and looking at this, but that was so long ago, right? And the industry certainly has changed. I think when partners partners give their partners opportunities to kind of understand more about themselves and benchmark themselves against industry peers, it's very, very helpful. And it helps build that relationship, right? The relationship that we just talked about. It's also important, right? When you provide that additional value, it really pays dividends, and it makes the relationship that you have with that partner that much stickier, right? We're getting more than just the value out of the software tool that we're using on a daily basis. We're getting this value that we can now use to make data-driven business decisions to help improve our organization. And we've been in business for a long time. We've got a ton of data. We have some really great tools. We're certainly much more sophisticated today than we were 23 years ago, and even 5 years ago or 10 years ago. We are got some really good information at our disposal on a daily basis. But going to those events like Jackie and Trevor just went to up in Boston was really helpful. We've analyzed the data that we've gotten back. We've started to look at how we can better position our organization, and there's value in that. And that makes us want to do more with N-able, right? When's the next one?
Right.
How do we continue having these conversations? Are you going to share this benchmarking data with us on a consistent basis? Can we tweak it a little bit to look at it? It would be more helpful if it looked like this, or can we get a little more, get inside of that data further? So that's really helpful. And N-able does that. There's many of our partners that have done that. And then those are the ones we continue to work with for many years.
That's really great. You talk a lot. I got to know you a little bit. You talk a lot about company culture. That's really, really important for you guys. And you told me a little bit about this book that you had written, this culture handbook. Can you tell me a little bit about? You want to talk a little bit about the culture that you guys? It's so important.
Sure. Culture's been so important. I mean, I learned that early on and owning this business, right? You have to have the right people, and you've got to get them in the right seats on the bus. We were talking about that a little bit before, Chris, but and then you need to kind of build this culture of a place where people want to come to work, because we spend so much time working, right? And I know the world's changed a little bit in the last few years. There's more of this remote work idea and hybrid work idea and so on and so forth. We have some of that here for sure, but the majority of our employees work in the office. They like coming here, and they like coming here because it's a fun place to work. At least that's what I'm told. I'm biased, right? So I can't sit here and say that without being somewhat biased, but people enjoy working here, and that's what I hear. I do 30-day check-ins with all of our new employees, right? I sit down with them and say, hey, how's the first 30 days going? What did we do well? What didn't we do well? Are you enjoying your time here? Don't BS me. Tell me the truth. What's going on? We want to get better. We want to make this experience better for you. So culture is very important, and getting that information and then making changes quickly. One of the things that I say all the time here is do not fear failure. Fear never getting a chance to fail. So we're going to try stuff. And if it doesn't work well, we're going to fail fast. And we'll try something different. If that doesn't work, we're going to fail fast. And then we'll try something different until we get it right. And we get a lot of feedback from people and from employees. And we listen to that feedback and we try it. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But at least we've tried it. So you mentioned the Cultural Companion, our handbook. Yep. It's really it's a guide to working here at Bright and what's expected of you, and about the history of Bright, and where we're going, where we're heading, all that good stuff. And it's not unique. Tony Hsieh, the founder and previous CEO of Zappos. Sorry, lost it for a second there. I read it into my tongue. Of Zappos, who eventually, sold to Amazon. He was, a company culture guru. He just built an incredible culture at Zappos, and, lots of documentation. Wrote a book on, creating happiness and all the good stuff in the workplace. And it really resonated with me. It's something that I always wanted to do. I wanted to create a great place where people love to come to work. So, we felt and still will continue to do this. We feel like, documenting our culture. If you're serious about culture, you document it. So we created this cultural companion, and
It's great.
it's been great. Everybody gets one on day one, and they can reference it. It's got lots of cool stuff.
That's fantastic. Exciting to hear that. Culture is always a really, really important thing. It's one of the reasons why people stay around for a long, long time if they like where they work, which sounds to me like you've got a lot of employees that like that. So
Yeah.
that's great. So what's the future look like for Bright? I know we talk a little bit about, I'm sure you get M&A calls every day and every week. And like, are you looking to continue to grow? Are you looking to maybe buy some companies down the line, or is there some technical, exciting stuff coming down the line that you're hoping to go for?
Yeah, we're firing on all cylinders right now. Very excited to be where we are. We still have very aggressive organic growth plans. If we could find the right organization to kind of bring under the Bright umbrella, we would do that, certainly. Culture's got to be a fit. It's like kind of the number one thing, right? It's not just about the numbers and the profits and all the good stuff. It's got to be the right fit, because we spent so much time kind of pulling this thing together and building this cultural globe, right? Snow globe of culture. That's got to be number one. But having said that, that's part of our growth strategy. Organic growth, we've grown organically for 23 years here. It's been pretty incredible to actually be a part of and witness to some extent. If we could find the right mix, we'd love to bring somebody in on the fold. But we're not interested in kind of selling the organization at all. We've just got too many other goals and objectives. Trevor and I are really competitive guys. And we've got some goals and objectives that are pretty lofty, and we want to still get to those. So we got some more time here to invest in a seat for sure.
Sounds good, Justin. All right, I got one more question for you. So we call this the now that's it podcast, and I wanted to ask you, what's the point in your career? You've built this amazing business here in Rochester. What's the point when you realized, oh, that's it? Like I've done it. What's that inflection point?
Oh man, that's a great question, Chris. I love it. It's tough to pat yourself on the back, right? I'm never satisfied. Just again, I said I'm ultra competitive. I'm never satisfied, but I look back at 1999 and walking in the door in May of 1999 for the first time, and remembering that and seeing where we are today, and it's hard not to say, hey, you've done a pretty good job here. And I've had some private conversations with my wife a couple times and say, this has been pretty good. I mean, it's been a lot of hard work, and she's been a big part of it, supporting me and taking care of 3 boys, when I had to go out on the road or do whatever, or work long hours or 24 hours a day for 5 straight days or something like that. And, there's times that we do sit there and say, hey, this has been pretty good, but I've never really, this thirst is never really truly quenched. Once you achieve something, you got to set another goal, and you've got to have some attainable goals that you and your team can get to, and then you got to have some really big, hairy, audacious ones, right? And you got to go after those, and that's what I love doing. I love doing that, and I've got a great team of people around me. Like all these people, they're just so great, and the leadership team is fantastic, and they're all on board. I mean, they're energized to kind of go out in there and conquer the world, and we're trying to.
That's great. Justin, I want to thank you again for talking to me today. It was really great to hear about your amazing story, and I want to wish you and the Bright team the absolute best going forward. Thanks a bunch.
Chris, thanks for having me. It's been fun having this conversation. It's great to look back and kind of reflect on where you've been and where you're still wanting to get to. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Be sure to subscribe to our podcast on YouTube or your preferred podcast platform, and follow Enable on LinkedIn. We appreciate your support and encourage you to leave a rating or review, as it helps us reach more listeners who can benefit from the wealth of knowledge shared on this show.